You're listening to the extreme metal podcast Necropolis, which is brought to you by Jason from Goatcraft and Shelly from HateMeditations.com and Metal Legion magazine. Welcome to Necropolis. We have another episode back to back. I know we just interviewed the Tombs guy, and now we have a really interesting episode for you today. So I want to thank Shelly for returning a couple days later after the last episode.
Hello, yeah, good to be here.
Yep, Shelly from HateMeditations.com and Metal Legion magazine. Always a great treat having him on here. So the guest today, coming soon to a crypt near you, is Dead Space Chamber Music, specifically Tom Bush, who is the guitarist, and he does some sampling, and the vocalist Ellen Southern. So I want to thank you both for coming on the program today.
Thank you.
Hi, yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having us on.
And thank you for not having very thick British accents. I was in England a couple months ago, kind of comparing all the different accents that I ran across. Shelley's easy to understand, but there are some people that I had a much difficulty with. So thank you for being intelligible to my American ears.
Yeah, I think some of the thicker Yorkshire accents were a bit of a challenge for you, weren't they?
I actually went to Finland. I went to Finland right after England, and it was easier for me to understand the Finnish people talking in English than it was the English people talking English. But yeah, great times. Had a great time with Mr. Shelley here, and definitely drank more than usually. So good times. And I had some fish and sticks or chips or whatever it was called.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good times. So what's really interesting about Dead Space Chamber Music, a little bit, it's definitely from left field. Left field is outside of the norm. And so some music is really, really hard to classify, and it confounds me sometimes. Like, where are they bringing all these influences from and all that? And so Dead Space Chamber Music has a lot of different influences into the music, most notably is a very strong early music atmosphere that they're going for, as well as I can tell there's goth influences. I can tell many things going on in the music, and it's like whatever resonates with them that they want to put into their expression. So just for a cookie cutter type of question, like, how did you decide to get together and mold this very unique ensemble of musicians and sounds?
Well, it started off as a duo of us, ourselves. We really wanted to work with another instrument, and we particularly liked the cello, and we happened to meet Liz, cellist, through playing at a quite quirky little festival here in an abandoned ex-public convenience. Strangely, it was like an Edwardian loos basically that had been abandoned, and people ran a festival in it. That's the kind of thing that sort of happens in Bristol, sort of quirky things like that. So she was one of the people running it, so she played with us on our set, and it sort of went from there. Really, she's very strong in improvisation, and she'd done some she studied music for film, and these were two things that kind of clicked with us. We were already sort of looking into studying early music and researching early music and that sort of thing. So then having her bring in those things, I think that kind of set the scene in terms of atmosphere, those three elements.
Yeah,
I would say.
Yeah, and that's going back a few years now. So
yeah,
it's obviously in the time since then, things have changed, and we've sort of incorporated more influences into what we do. But it started off as kind of semi improvised, a lot of that, which was that's kind of stuff that Liz, the cellist, was doing.
Very atmospheric,
and
it's cinematic, but then with the early music forms already sort of being reimagined. And then so that was around 2015, and then just literally before lockdown, just a few months before, we had Katie join us, drummer, percussionist, and that's brought a whole nother side of it. She likes experiment. We all like experimenting, and kind of one thing. It's funny because we're quite different individuals, but one thing we all like is kind of experimenting with our own instrument and listening to each other. And sometimes there is that when we play together, that you hear a sound and you're like, I don't even know who's making that. Could be me, because or it could be that, or it could be because we all like making and like sort of pushing what we can do with the sounds that we create. But anyway, having a drummer come in, we were sort of moving towards kind of, we had an element of rhythmic stuff anyway that was sort of growing, especially around like medieval Renaissance dance rhythms, that sort of thing. But then having an actual drummer made that solidify, and also kind of brought it increased the heaviness. And so you hear some kind of doomy sounds on the album as well. So yeah, it's kind of these elements coming together.
Yeah, I think that maybe some of the kind of post-punk or like industrial elements, some of that came from not having a drummer, actually. So sort of by necessity, using like drum machines and like a sampler for pre-programmed rhythms, that kind of thing. And if you do that because you don't have a drummer, then that does certainly, it kind of ties it more to some stuff that you would have heard in like post-punk, goth rock, industrial stuff.
Yeah, so on the Black Hours, you can definitely hear it's sort of a meeting of very new sounds and very old sounds. And as things sort of progress throughout the album, you mentioned there's kind of an element of doom to it, as well as sort of ambient and noise. But it comes together really well. It doesn't sound, it sort of sounds very natural almost. Just these sort of fragments of sort of historical music that you can spot, even for sort of a layperson that might not necessarily be familiar with sort of medieval styles and stuff, but then it kind of very naturally slides into those more modern aspects, and you can hear the sort of guitar driven and drum driven parts that are sort of a cross between post rock and doom, and elements of industrial, as you say, as well.
And I mean, other as well as historical sources, things like chant, as well, sacred music, as well as historical like dance forms or something like that, or just sort of retrieved historic music. We kind of, I'm really glad you say that, because that's kind of what we were going for. It's like when you're juggling a few things, like to us it makes sense, but there was this kind of nervousness, like when I pressed publish and released the album, like on Bandcamp, publish, it's like, okay, that's it now. It was really hard to know what anyone would make of it. It was really hard to know, because as I say, we'd worked quite a lot on it. We'd been working on it for a couple of years, and I'd got to the point where I was listening to it over and over again on headphones, and it made absolute sense, but you just think, don't even know how to describe this to anyone. Really,
it is difficult to know what other bands to kind of mention it alongside, as like the Dead Can Dance comparison has come up before. And I can definitely see the connections there, but even then, we don't really sound that similar to them.
No.
Maybe there's some similarities, but I think in terms
more
of
experimental what we're doing.
I mean, in terms of how they work, like their approach, I think maybe combining different stuff, taking influences from early music and world music, that kind of thing,
but then a track like Ion, so it's as I say, to us internally, and that's why it kind of felt like this little world that we'd created that sort of sustained us a bit through those difficult times in the lockdown. Everyone has their own story, everyone has the things that they struggled with, that afterwards it was kind of hard to even communicate to others those things, because some of them you could say and some of them you couldn't say. But we kind of we kept connected one way or another, whether it was digitally or when we could meet up or doing live streams or whatever it was. And we just had that thing in common, that we were chipping away at this thing. And it was a way to kind of, you know, when you couldn't move, when you were stuck in, you know, you could exercise with your mind, and you could travel with your mind and with your instrument, and you know, you could go anywhere with it. So maybe that, I don't know, I just thought of this, but maybe that made it even more that way, because it would, you know, you're just hungry to kind of have those sensations and experiences that you would have maybe normally had with just interactions and being in the world and stuff. But yeah, it kind of it for me anyway, it felt like we made this little vessel, you know, to sail on and through the stormy seas or something. And yeah, as I say, it made sense. But yeah, we didn't. And I mean, you know, we've had really actually an overwhelm, like we've been quite overwhelmed sometimes with some of the words that people have said about it, including yourself. Just like it means so much, because it felt quite a risk, you know what I mean? We're not that well known. We don't really have a huge apparatus around us. We're just ourselves, and you know, it's not a sort of slick machine. It's just like, it's really passionate about it. And so, you know, releasing something like that, we really hoped that whoever it found that it meant something to, then it would find them. And you know, there was the odd, I think, review where I think they just hadn't really got it. And
which was bound to happen.
Yeah, which is bound to happen, because you're making something that is, yeah, it's kind of, you can't just put it on and go, oh, it's that, you know. So we were more surprised that there wasn't more of that, to be quite honest.
Yeah, expected more bad reviews.
Yeah, like you know, and we weren't prepared for that. I mean, you know, if we'd have had loads of terrible, I'd have just been in pieces, honestly. But yeah, you know, really just so many people just really wanting to tell us that it got through to them and meant something, and that was amazing. So it was all worth it.
I think it kind of landed at the right time as well, because you mentioned obviously the lockdown and people dealing with that in whatever way they could, and because it is quite a sort of haunting and eerie album at times as well, I think it kind of sort of resonated with a certain subset of music fans that were kind of looking for that not escapism, because that's not really the right word, but some kind of outlet for feelings of sorrow or not quite knowing where things are going, where your own personal life is going, but also where society is going, and so on. And I think, yeah, it's sort of, for me anyway, it captured a lot of those feelings really well. And just going back to sort of similar artists, I mean, yeah, I would definitely not say that you sound like some of the artists that we've mentioned, but there is definitely a similar ethos.
Yeah.
And I was thinking as well of sort of comparing to sort of like what's broadly described as like the Nordic folk bands like Wardruna and things like that. And they sort of, you know, they make a point of being music historians, almost trying to rediscover these old traditions and old styles and figure out a way to sort of present them in a modern sense. Would you say there's a sort of element of reacquainting with like the English equivalent of that in terms of like English folk history? I know it's deeply tied in with like religious music as well, but was that like a conscious choice, or was it very sort of accidental in a way?
I think it was. There's definitely it's definitely a conscious choice. Yeah, it's not something that we've really sat down and thought a huge amount about. It's more just been like a general decision to take some of those musical sources. So yeah, like on the first album, we had did a reinterpretation of a John Dowland song. So it was like Renaissance, English Renaissance songwriter, like probably the most famous English songwriter at the time. I suppose just because those, you know, because we are, you know, because we're from England, so that's those are the kinds of things that we were aware of. Yeah,
it's kind of what speaks to us as well. I mean, when it comes, I mean, it's not so much like, you know, in folk, there's like the song collectors and the sort of traditional. It's not so much that. It's more the older stuff that we look to. And yeah, I just think there's sounds, you know, the modal nature of it and stuff like that. I think, yeah, if you grow up in the UK, those things sort of speak to you in a way. But we're from all over the UK actually as well. So, but yeah, I think it was, I don't know, it was just a feeling that we wanted to explore that stuff.
Yeah. I mean,
and then we've just followed it, you know, just researched it more and more. And then when something you see a tune, or you look at the fragments of a tune, and it just really speaks to you, and you just think, wow, the way I think about it is, wow, there's a fragment of something there that hundreds of years ago probably made someone laugh or dance or cry or something. And then you think, well, it could still do that, you know. And I love that idea that something can sort of time travel, like a musical element can time travel and find its humans again, to provoke these feelings in. And when we perform live, thinking that way is a very powerful thing, because it helps you deliver that thing kind of through yourself. And that's a very strong motivation, like rather than feeling we're making so-called, you know, original material in the conventional sense, although, you know, it is generally a mixture. There's that idea that we're kind of a bit standing on the shoulders of giants, and a lot of them are anonymous, actually. A lot of the tunes from medieval periods and stuff, you don't really know the authors. They've been through a lot of hands. Yeah.
Well, that's one of the elements of folk music, isn't it? That there's a much more informal relationship to originality or ownership, in the sense that it doesn't exist. These songs are designed to be passed around and reinterpreted.
Yeah, we had this conversation a while ago with Katie, our drummer, and it was I think she said something like like the artists don't own the songs. Like the songs kind of have a life of their own that's independent of who's performing them. Because I think that came up with I remember who it was. It might have been like you know, Simon and Garfunkel with Scarborough Fair, and when they first did that, they didn't say that it was like a folk song, you know, that had been, you know, no one knows how old it is. Tons of folk musicians have done it, but they kind of didn't make that clear, really, and they sort of let people think it was their song, sort of thing. So probably shouldn't be doing that. But.
Just completely off topic, I happen to be wearing my Dying Bride t-shirt, and they happen to cover that song as well.
Okay,
very interesting way. Anyway, sorry, that was a bit of a tangent there. So in terms of the live setting, how do you approach that differently to recording? Is there a sense of much more space for improvisation and playing off each other? And do you sort of, again, do you kind of just make space for that in the set, or do you plan it a bit more formally, or is it very much just off the cuff?
Well, one thing we've started doing that is reflected a bit in the Black Hours is we've been paying attention to, so we've got pieces, but then how do you get from one piece to another, sort of thing. And that's something that we try and do live. We'll let one piece sort of a bit dissolve, and then it sort of something else comes through, and then that's catching it by the tail of the next song and stuff like that. So, for example, on the first album, each track was separate with silences, whereas with the Black Hours, well, there's a toll of a bell between each piece, but also one thing sort of rolls into the next a bit more. But live, we get to explore that even more, like really take it apart. That's one thing I'd say. Whenever we've had the chance to record, as I say, it's kind of all we're a modest operation. We haven't really had the resources to really spend very, you know, huge amounts of time in those kind of settings. So we've more or less, with the tracks that you've heard, literally it's literally 1 or 2 takes, and we all play live, we all play at the same time, and we can see each other. We set it up that way. The guy who recorded all our stuff, Tom Berry, he knows we like it like that, so we'll get a big room and we'll all be able to look at each other and feed off each other. But it's literally kind of 1 or 2 takes, and that's it. And I think in a perfect world, what we'd really like is to kind of find somewhere where, like, for example, we can take how we can extend and expand things when we perform them live. Like, for example, in this, we're working on a semi-acoustic set at the moment, and we're doing Bird on a Briar, a song from the album, but I went out and found an alternative historical melody, and I kind of sing that a cappella at the start of it as an introduction, and so you sort of like you're always finding ways to represent the things anyway, sort of like these elements. So if we could bring that even more into the recording process, because when we go into the recording, we've usually rehearsed and maybe even done a gig or a live stream in advance to kind of nail it, but we only have a couple of takes. So I think, if in a perfect world we'd be able to record that would be even more approaching the kind of live setting where we can really sort of take things apart and play with them and sort of transform things.
I mean, like a lot of the time the stuff that we've been doing, it sort of changes, as we continue to rehearse it does change, kind of develops over time. It isn't a case of kind of reproducing exactly what was recorded. So a lot of times it can be quite annoying listening to the stuff that we recorded and thinking like, oh well, since then it's kind of moved on a bit, and it'd be great to re-record it, but
then you're like a hamster on a wheel, aren't you? and it's the way that the music is alive and is a conversation, really. It's that amazing thing of like, when the song is in the room or the piece is in the room, because the elements are there and it inhabits everything and you can embody it, but then you can change it as well, and it's still that piece. You still grow with it. You can explore things that you want to do about your own instrument through that vehicle then. It's kind of restless, I guess, and more sort of challenging to ourselves, which is what we want, because we don't want to just have a piece and then it's like, right, it's like that, and we just recreate it everything. I think we're just way too fascinated with the kind of elements of music themselves that we just keep exploring the things.
That's interesting from my point of view, because Jason and I, we obviously come from a metal background where everything is quite strictly composed. The recording is like the definitive version of it, and the live setting will be as close a recreation or a more intense recreation of those recorded musics. And both approaches sort of work for different forms of music, but that evolution is very interesting, and it means that the recorded work is kind of just a capturing of that moment. It's one of many potential kind of examples of that piece or whatever.
Chili. Actually, every show that I played with GoCraft has been improv, so I have a little experience on that. But a question that I do have, I read one of the interviews at Dawn recently, and you mentioned, Ellen, that you have a project that you do sightseeing. You go to various locations, and that seems really interesting, like old medieval ruins and things of that nature. And I know Dead Space Chamber Music performs in like catacombs and crypts and all that. And, do you feel like these environments have an influence on how you express yourself with your voice, like the specific environments that you're singing in?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's why those things are so interesting to me. With the solo work, sight singing, it's as lo-fi as it gets. It's literally me, usually on a rainy day, visiting somewhere that's quite a bit out of the way, exactly like the kind of place like a Neolithic long barrow or a deserted Victorian bridge or something, or and just literally exploring with my voice, and you're just free to kind of make sounds that don't have to be well, you don't know what they're going to be, because they're just in direct response literally to the surfaces around you and the kind of day, like whether it is, if it's, you know, how the sound travels and everything. And it was just a way for me to kind of root the experience of singing in a kind of almost non-musical setting, like in a life setting, like an elemental setting. And I was encouraging myself to just make sounds that don't have to be melodic or anything, or, you know, even pleasant sometimes. So it's just a way that I freed myself up. And then at the same time, with Dead Space Chamber Music, we were very drawn to performing in like churches, crypts, stuff like that, because we're working with historical material, and it's kind of like, but we never it's really important for us, we're not trying to pretend we're in the past. We're very much here and now, but the point is that these spaces have been there all those hundreds of years, and now we are here, you know, and we are here now. And so it's like a sort of when you're in those spaces, it's like a time out of time, where lots of different times can exist at the same moment. And so it was like, you kind of, that's a very inspiring and intense, and kind of I mean, not just these kind of spaces have different resonances and amazing resonances, so that's a bit relating to the sightseeing thing. It's like, how do these sounds work in this space? And we've tailored sets deliberately to the kind of physical environments that we're going to perform in that way. But also it's just that they're historical places, and so you just feel that you just sense, you know, there's so much human experience and in these places like, I mean, where we live, there's just so many historical sites all around us from loads of different periods. So it's very, very much part of the present day, is to be aware of all that. And and it kind of, again, it's that thing of like, it kind of keeps you humble, but, you know, you don't feel it's all about you, you know. It's you're there, but your life is quite short, and you know, you're just another little set of footprints going through these spaces and making some sound. So kind of ephemeral, bittersweet, you know, sense of life and death, really. I think that really infuses what we do.
Oh, it's very, very, very cool. So I see that you guys are playing in Rome, Italy in August, I guess next month. That's coming up.
Oh no, we're playing with a band from Rome. Oh. We're playing, yeah.
Oh.
We'd love to play in Rome, but I wish. But we're actually planning, and in fact that's the next publicly announced gig. But before that, on Saturday, we're actually doing a secret gig by invite only in a medieval crypt here in Bristol. And we're kind of presenting our acoustic set, and we were just rehearsing actually last night, and we've decided we're going to play it kind of in the round. So we'll be facing each other, and we'll have the people all around us. And it's a vaulted crypt, so it's got these incredible vaulted ceilings above, and I just can't wait to hear what that's going to be like, and what that atmosphere will be like. So that's what we're going to do this Saturday. That's our very next gig, but as I say, that's a secret one.
the reverb in crypts, that should be pretty intense, right?
Yeah, it should be amazing. Yeah,
very cool.
That was actually going to lead on to my next question, just because obviously you guys being based in Bristol, and playing a lot of shows around there. I've been to Bristol a couple of times, but I've not really I've not seen any live music there. Is there sort of specific aspects of the scene or the circuit that you play on that kind of really chimes with what Dead Space Chamber Music are trying to do? Or are there any other kind of artists that you kind of connect with on the local scene that might be of like a similar sort of ethos?
Not really.
Yeah, I wouldn't say so. No.
No.
I mean, there's people that we've done gigs with a few times, but yeah, I mean, yeah, in terms of like the ethos, I don't think so.
No, we kind of feel like we're on our own. We're our own thing. I mean, we do run. We run nights here with Dark Alchemy event series where with our friend Tommy. So a lot of the gigs that we've done in these interesting spaces is kind of we've organised them ourselves. We've invited people to come and play on those bills with us and stuff like that. We're like the house band of of our own event series. And really that was because
we started doing it was because we didn't actually know where
we didn't know
what we were doing would fit in locally, so we thought, well, we should probably start see if we can start our own event series, because we just
if the thing isn't there that you want, just invent it, because we didn't really know where we fit in, so we just invented it and made our own events, and then
that's interesting, because the reason I asked that is because I mentioned before that you do have quite a lot of resonance amongst metal fans, but again, that's not exclusively so. So it is interesting to find out like what kind of gigs you could put together where, because obviously you want to put bands on that are distinct and are doing their own thing, but you also want them to be linked by some kind of theme or similarity, especially in terms of the audience as well. So it's interesting that you basically had to create it almost.
And I think we like lots of genres, as you can probably imagine, and the events that we put on, it's hard to always say how those things connect, but we just feel they do. It's mainly in terms of atmosphere, but there could be things of different genre on the same bill, for example, on a night we put on. So, but like you say, it's there's a connection. So
like in terms of the atmosphere, so it's been, I mean, a lot of electronic stuff that we've had on, so in the kind of a sort of dark ambient noise and some kind of power electronics type stuff, which I suppose does cross over to to certain kinds of metal. Like I know, you'd have people, they've got like a metal project, and then they might have like a kind of a sort of a dark ambient side project on that kind of thing. And like you might have certain albums, like maybe like black metal albums, where you might have kind of interludes between that have something of a kind of dark ambient atmosphere going on.
Well, we've had people who have done like kind of experimental neoclassical almost, or dark wave, or stuff like that. So I think we kind of tried to create our own little like thing in Bristol. But like generally speaking, the kind of culture here, it's not something we massively personally connect to. No.
Okay. And you recently put out a music video for one of the songs on the album. Could you tell us a bit about that as well? Because it looks very interesting.
Yeah, that was another a bit braver this time because of the reception to the album. But again, press and publish on that. I was like, I don't know what people can make of this now. It's getting a familiar feeling. Well, that we it was kind of like the idea for the visual came about from the album art. I don't know if you've seen the booklet that comes with the album.
I have, yeah.
So in that booklet you see these kind of almost diorama setup images they're sort of, again, like what we do with our music. We'll take medieval or Renaissance source, and then we'll kind of interpret it our own way. So the Black Hours that sort of inspired that artwork, there's you can look it up online, the Black Hours, and you see that there's these beautiful miniatures. I mean, this book is this big, it's tiny, the original Black Hours manuscript. So there's all these, it's like a prayer book that would take you through a whole day and a night, for example. So, and the illustrations are, they sort of take you through with the prayers. So they're these incredibly detailed, beautiful miniatures. And I kind of just wanted to make our own versions that are sort of like our own internal story almost. And so those were made with actual collage bits of pictures of gigs we've done in the churches and crypts where we've done them, and then also bits, from the collage from the book and everything. And then we sort of placed them in those. There's particularly 2 churches and a crypt here that we've used a lot. And there's one placed in each one. So it's funny, you kind of got this strange still image of us performing in the place that it is in, so it's kind of weird layers. And then we just thought, this. So when we were taking those photographs, we thought this could be a video. We could actually film these and light them in and kind of make them, just make them by having this kind of lighting each one differently in a kind of moving light. It's kind of exaggerates that they're still, and there's something quite deathly about them to me. When I look at the stillness of them is really creepy, which I love. So the visual image was so it was so sort of like, that's what we want to do visually. It's like, well, which track from the album, which, and I just thought, well, it's got to be the most abstract one, because that's what's going to go best with that kind of imagery. And we can sort of edit it to bits in the track where, something dramatic happens, or so it's kind of a way to bring both of those, combine 2 of those a bit pre-existing things from the album, and then like bring them to life in another way. It was it was really like filming it. It was freezing. We were filming it in January, and it was a crypt in January. It was absolutely freezing. We were just lying on our bellies with cameras and holding up lights, and if someone would have seen us from behind and filmed that would have just been very, very strange. We had these little cutouts all on the floor like in front of us, and you'd just breathe and they'd all knock each other over all the time. But it was really fun to do. It felt very creative, and it felt very sort of like you looked through the lens and you were just in another world that was disorientating, and played with scale and played with presence and played with all sorts of things. It was very fun to do.
And it brings another aspect to the music as well. I know that's broadly what well-made music videos are supposed to do, but I guess even in describing it like that, it's a little bit misleading. It's more sort of just almost like a visual aid or a visual accompaniment to the piece to sort of bring out a different aspect of it, I suppose. The word that keeps coming to mind for me is eerie as well. And just on that as well, you appeared on a compilation put out by Eighth Tower Records last year, I believe. And this caught my eye, not just because I had just discovered you and was following what you do online, but also it was called Hauntology in the UK. And that's a phrase I came across via a book club where someone was recommending a book by Mark Fisher, who kind of popularized the term in more recent years. So I don't know where to kind of insert ourselves here in terms of describing what hauntology means and how we could describe Dead Space Chamber music as hauntological music, but we kind of touched on it earlier in terms of your discussion around tapping into these places with layers of history on top of them and kind of reconnecting with that. And hauntology is kind of, it has mixed meanings depending on who you approach, but it kind of taps into that sense of not necessarily nostalgia, not mourning for a lost past or anything like that, but looking at certain times and thinking about the futures that could have been, or the ways that history could have played out differently, and connecting that up with either music or sound that kind of interacts. So were there any kind of aspects of that you approached with doing the track for this compilation called the Grail Carol, or was it very much just, again, sort of an organic formation that just came out of just composing more?
I think I suppose it tends to be a bit of both. That there is some conscious thought behind what's going on, but then a lot of it does happen organically. It's not like so in relation to a concept like hauntology, it's not like we would kind of think about this sort of stuff in great detail and talk about it and have a really precise conscious plan in mind. I mean, we would talk about those kinds of ideas that you mentioned, for sure. But then I think when it gets down to sort of putting the music together, it's mainly like an organic process.
I mean that actual Grail Carol was a bit of a funny one for us to do, because normally we're looking at, as I say, kind of historic sources and stuff, and this piece is actually a sort of pastiche of late medieval music. So
we were kind of doing a reworking of a reworking.
Because of the hauntology theme and this idea. That was the idea of the hauntology theme, was that it's this kind of, it's how you perceive the past a bit, and how the ideas of the past echo through the ages and sort of change a bit, and the sort of Norman, I think it's very obscure kind of academic Norman Eel, who actually he did these things called what were they called? I'll remember in a minute. Restored carols, where he would genuinely look at stuff from hundreds of years ago. So I think that the original words that it came from were like about the Bells of Paradise or something like that, and it was about the Grail, and that then morphed into a folk song that someone like Shirley Collins has recorded. But then he kind of, it's that this sort of folk revival interest in the 70s. He was around then, researched old forms. But then he was restoring these carols, but in very much a kind of 70s kind of way, almost like a pastiche. So, and we know the difference because we'll be looking at like stuff from, the medieval Renaissance period, and then you see this and you think it kind of feels like something from that time, but it's very 70s as well. It's very much a kind of 70s perception of that time. And that's because that's when a lot of, as I say, a lot of interest in early music came around. And so a lot of the things that we have now to work from were because people at that time took that interest and actually produced collections of these kind of musics. So it was our little nod to that kind of period of kind of almost nerdy interest in early music, and people sort of making their own versions, but that were also very much about the time they lived in. So it's a strange song for us to kind of do our version of. It's like a version of a version of a version of an actual genuine late medieval song in a way, but that was the whole idea of the hauntology thing. And we did think, and part of what we looked up about it was it can be nostalgia for different technologies as well. And so like we kind of did part of it where we got a little handheld tape recorder and recorded a bit of the sort of a vocal outro bit in this tape recorder and stuff, like a cassette tape thing. So we're trying to layer, and part of it was part of the sounds that we used. Sound samples were some of my sight singing recordings. One of them was a recording of the sound inside a medieval lighthouse on the Isle of Man, the Isle of Wight, on a really old phone. So the phone speaker was terrible. So it had that sort of weird cackly old technology thing. So we were trying to So we were trying to make a track that sounded like it was old, but it was also sort of strangely like a folly almost, like the difference between an actual castle and folly.
Yeah.
So we normally go for the castle, but this time we went for the folly just because of the theme. So it's quite,
So just for the benefit of any listeners that are not familiar with that, follies are Victorian constructions that were kind of imitating medieval architecture, castles and things like that. So you see them around parks and various kind of community spaces in Britain. They're sort of a pastiche, but of a pastiche from a different era, from the Victorian era, which is quite interesting. But that's also very interesting in terms of using modern technologies to reinterpret old forms and old music, because it sheds a new light on it in a lot of ways. That's really interesting. Jason, did you want to jump in with a question? Sorry.
Yeah. I know you're really excited for this episode, so I didn't want to step on you too much, Shelley, and so you can get in your questions and I don't fog up the episode. But I do have just doing some research on Dead Space chamber music. I see that you guys are, the age range of when you did that interview is 30 to 44 for the members. So do you feel that, I don't want to, throw your age out there or anything. I know some women are sensitive about that, but do you feel that you guys have more of a maturity because you are a little bit older and approaching? A lot of bands start out with very young people and teenagers, young adults, and they could be pretty crazy and hectic, getting drunk and speeding and all that, and doing Lord knows what. But do you guys feel that now that you're a little bit older, that you're more collected in that regard, that everything, you guys seem to be more on the same page, and you're not getting arrested every other weekend?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
It's an interest. I think we're sort of an anomaly in many ways, and this is another way that we're an anomaly, because I think some people are sort of starting to discover us a bit now. I mean, obviously not millions and millions of people, but people such as yourselves, and I think sometimes you could tell in some mentions and stuff that they just assumed we were all younger just because they hadn't heard of us. And I do find that quite a funny assumption, because musicians are musicians for life, aren't they? And we've all done stuff before this that has led to what this is. I don't know. I think it does affect what we do, to be honest. I'm not entirely sure I know how to word how.
Yeah,
but I think it does.
Yeah, and it's. I mean, I don't think any of us did the whole thing, the kind of stuff that younger bands get up to. I don't know if any of us have actually ever done that. So it's hard to know what to compare it to, unless you've sort of actually done that kind of thing. But I think it probably does mean that we're more focused. It's about the music, basically. It's not about anything else. I'm not saying there's probably there's good things about that there may be some things that you miss out on, and I suppose like the kind of the sort of lifestyle elements that like younger bands might get into. That's kind of that's got its purpose,
and also the time, because when you're younger, you've got a lot more free time in general, whereas we've all got. We're doing this with kind of quite developed lives as well. So sometimes there's kind of sort of we're juggling a lot more stuff that we take quite seriously. So time is precious, attention is precious. You also, I guess, isn't it, as you go through life, you just get, you don't think you're going to live forever anymore. And also this is just my own personal thing, is with the voice changes as you age. And I've been singing for, oh my God, how long? Only about 14 years. Because before that I was more like a visual artist. And definitely, if I hear a recording of myself even 2, 3, 4 years ago, or let alone, you can hear that it's changing. So part of you is like quite interested in that, but then part of you is like, oh God, I want to use what I have now, and it can give you slightly this sense of anxiety, because yeah, we really want the chance to kind of do what we can, but sometimes it can be a challenge, you know, when you don't have, you know, all the hours of the week and everything. So yeah, I don't know. So I'm saying it definitely affects us in terms of, yeah, maybe seriousness and yeah, like focus on the music and just really wanting it to be like, so imagine if we don't have many more chances, we want what we've done to really stand up, you know, and also, yeah, just that kind of, yeah, so it's a drive, you know, you're not going to live forever, you know, I mean, we're not death's door yet, but you know, but it definitely makes you not want to waste time, basically.
So there's more focus and more intent and purpose, it seems that you have.
Yeah, and produce things that really stand up, you know. Yeah.
Are you taking any precautions to preserve your voice? Like, I know some singers drink honey and do stuff like that, and you know, they're very, very protective of their voices.
Well, one I think basically good technique. I know you hear all these things that singers say and all that. It's like, oh yeah, there's nothing better than good technique. That's what messes up your voice, is bad technique, basically. So get your technique right, and you can sing like the bel canto singers. You can sing till you're 67, whatever. But of course, you know, yeah, there's, you know, you have to keep singing, and you have to, yeah, take care of it in that way. Just keep singing and keep doing it in a good way. But what changed? So what changes is, for example, the tones. I mean, not just the range that you have, but also the tones. So, for example, my voice will go lower and lower as I get older. So it's just how it is.
So
you know?
technique.
But technique means that at any age you are, you'll be able to do the full capacity of what you can at that age. Yeah.
Yeah,
but I wouldn't rely on any gimmicks. No, just proper technique. I mean, I sing every week in a choir called, it's not a choir, but it's a singing group. It's a singing tradition, actually, Sacred Harp singing. It's from the American South, but it has its roots in Gregorian chant and folk music, especially from England, West Country a lot. And it's called shout singing. And it really is that you shout and sing, and it sorts your, for me, it sorts your technique out so well that you can do that for 6 hours and not get tired. And that's my maintenance every week, is to kind of do that, do some shout singing, keep it all in order, get the muscles right.
Amazing. 6 hours of singing, that's amazing. So I read a little bit about you guys are actually preparing material for your next album, and you want to bring in a more diverse range of instruments as well. I believe you're going to do woodwinds, is that correct?
Well, we just want to kind of expand. Well, we had this idea that I guess some people have done, which is kind of because some of us play other things. So, for example, Liz can play piano, can't she?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Katie plays guitar. And we were thinking, you know, and things like that. And then, like, also I wanted to get Katie and Liz singing and do some, because we haven't got any close harmony stuff, and that would be really nice. Be a little choir leader. And also we wanted to kind of build some of our own instruments. I mean, we already use, you know, I like to bring in like found sound elements, a bit music concrete type thing, where you know, I'll use objects that the reason I've chosen that object is because it's symbolic of the thing that song is about. And so we're already quite, you know, fairly experimental with kind of sound making, but then we were looking up like building some instruments as well out of just materials that are around. Katie said, because Katie's from Padstow, where they do the traditional festival there, like the May Day stuff. her family and her, they all take part in that May Day parade. And she was saying, yeah, they make instruments out of beer bottle caps and stuff like that. So we've been collecting beer and cider bottle caps for some time, for example. But yeah, kind of, just want to, play and explore it with a combination of each of us using a different instrument than you might be used to hearing us do, but also like making some more like some just things that sound unique that way. Yeah.
Is there an artistic sort of idea in mind? Is it going in a sort of darker or brighter direction, do you think, or do you have sort of any concepts that you're planning to work with, or is that still very much in the germinal phase?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it might be a bit too early to say like exactly how it's going to turn out in terms of atmosphere. I mean, I think like with the last one, the Black Hours, I think a lot of the atmosphere around that probably did come from the lockdown stuff and the general, if it sounds like it's a bit of a dark album, a bit eerie, a bit tense, that kind of thing. I think it was probably just because those were the times that we were in. So,
yes, that definitely came through.
We'll see how in how bad shape we all are when we do that.
I mean, if I had to say anything, I'd say exploratory and almost bit playful. I mean, one thing we'd also like to do is kind of record in locations. Like I've got this fascination with like being in a cave and making sounds in a cave and stuff like that, bringing in natural environments. And I think there's just something about maybe it going like kind of, into the wild a bit, into the like, going into hidden places, going into secret places. Yeah, don't know, something like that.
Okay, I can't wait for that. Jason, I've got one more question. Did you want to dive in with anything else before I ask it?
Yeah, just one last thing, and I'll let Shelley take the reins again. Actually, I have two questions you can answer, very brief responses if you want to. Tom, you worked in the cemetery. What did you do in a cemetery?
I was a groundskeeper. So it's basically like it was a gardening groundskeeping job. It just happened to be in a cemetery.
A dead space at that.
Yeah.
Space.
But you did fill in for Gravedigger a couple of times, didn't you?
Yeah, a couple of times. They had like a gravedigger who came in, and he was like a subcontractor, and he apparently wasn't the easiest person in the world to work with. So a couple of times he just pissed off the guys who were working for him, and they walked out. So then they had to ask
come to get a grave.
The gardeners to do it. Yeah, but no, it only happened a couple of times.
Very cool. So very authentic with the name of the band, Dead Space Chamber Music. Performing dead spaces like crypts and all of that, as well as having some hands-on experience in a dead space. So earlier you're talking about how your songs keep morphing into newer and newer versions. Perhaps down the road, like if it sounds so different than the initial like inception and recording, would you re-record that, or because I know you play it live and it's differently live than it is on record. If it keeps changing and like the character keeps morphing into something new, perhaps recording that might be interesting to hear. So is there any plans for anything like that?
You mean like recording live shows
or re-recording songs?
Yeah, re-recording the songs because they're new. Yeah, they're new again. Essentially,
I think it's probably bound to happen at some point.
Well, we've done it already a couple of times, haven't we?
Have we?
So, yeah, because obviously when Katie joined, we had a lot of material that we'd already made, and we were like, all right, we've got a drummer now. So we actually started revisiting stuff.
We haven't recorded it though.
Well, there's the odd song. So we did an EP And on the EP is this song "Oh Death," which is attributed to Anne Boleyn. And we then, so that was 2000, I don't know, 16, 17, something like that.
I mean, we haven't done a studio.
No, we haven't, but we revisited that song with Katie on drums, and then we recorded a live session in a record shop here called Black City. It's a metal record shop run by our friend, and it wasn't lockdown, but it was like still a bit lockdown.
Yeah, just over a year ago.
Basically he let us be in the shop after hours, and we recorded like an EP, I guess, like a live session EP, and we have put that out as a CD. We have released that, so in that way it's not a studio recording as such, but you hear the version of "Oh Death" on there, and compared to the EP that we did, whatever it was, few years back, it's really different. So you can already hear that in our discography, that's one piece that we've revisited, and quite dramatically different. Another one is a Hildegard von Bingen piece that we do, over to Sapiente. We recorded that in Sapperton. That was another live session we recorded in a church in Gloucestershire, and we're working on that now again. And in fact, what we're going to play in the Crypt on Saturday is a kind of newer version of that, and we did it on live stream as well with the drums. So therefore, it's just got the same character, but it's kind of more edgy and more gritty.
But again, we haven't actually done like a studio.
But that's not been recorded yet.
Version. Yeah,
but
I mean, I think we will though. Because that's part of this acoustic stuff that we're doing. So it'd be great to kind of do like a proper studio job.
With that would be great. Stuff, But it's already sort of something that, in answer to your question, it's already something that's in progress, and some versions have already been released. But like live versions, session versions, I guess. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that could be really interesting. There's lots of possibilities there as well in terms of the way they sort of evolve naturally. But I just have one last question before we wrap up, which was, are there any plans to sort of take the live show on the road? I.e., when are you coming to Leeds?
Oh, do you know what? We really love to. We really want to.
Well, we found. It seems hard getting out of Bristol, to be honest.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. We're like, we want to get out of Bristol. We're tentative, but we're trying to put together some dates for the autumn. Haven't announced it yet, and I don't want to jinx it.
Okay.
I'll let you know. But hopefully, we'll get London and Manchester for early to mid November this year, and that's we'd be on the road with a duo called Hacker de Picciotto, who are so Alexander Hacker is from Einstürzende Neubauten, and his partner Danielle, who's this amazing multimedia artist from Berlin, from America originally, but she's like one of the people who started the Love Parade and stuff like that. Really long history as a sort of very avant-garde artist. So they are a duo. They've just done a tour of the whole of Europe. And we did a podcast with them, Performance Anxiety in America. And then basically kind of stayed in touch, and that's what we're trying to arrange now is a few dates in the UK with them, and since Neubauten's been proper influence for many years, it's a little bit that's scheduled. It's unannounced yet, but it's hopefully scheduled for November.
Great, looking forward to that. To be honest, I should probably take myself down to Bristol anyway. It's not a million miles away. But that sounds great. Jason, did you have any more questions or?
No, they primarily answered what I had to ask. So I want to thank you both for coming on the program today. Both Ellen and Tom from Dead Space Chamber Music. Thank you a million for coming on the show.
Cheers. Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Thanks for having us. Thanks very much.
Yes, sir. And yes, ma'am. And Shelley, thanks for bringing these guys on the program. They're very, very cool. And I enjoyed the Black Hours, their second album that came out. And it's on Bandcamp. And I believe it's still on vinyl. The cassettes have sold out and it's on CD still. So definitely check that out. I'll have a link in the description. Cool. So thank you. Cheers.
Not enough.